joining us on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to sit with us and kind of give us your feedback, give us some comments. We can answer any questions. Just thank you so much for being here. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Tammy Lee. I'm the Deputy Director for the Administration for the Hawaii Department of Transportation. On today's call, I have Deputy Director for Airports Kurt Otaguro, Deputy Director for Harbors Drake Kalili, Laura Ka'akua, she's our manager for our energy security program, as well as Jackie Chong. And just really welcome everybody. Next slide. Thank you. So our draft energy security and waste reduction plan, I think we finalized it in May, and we've been busy going out to the community, really trying to get as much community involvement and community input as we can. The final draft or the final plan will be issued in mid-October. And so just quickly, the agenda for this afternoon's meeting, we're going to talk about our major 3 foundational pillars, give some background of how we got to this point, talk to our emission reduction strategies for each mode, and then end with, make sure we set aside some time to get some questions, comments from everyone. Next slide. Okay, so these are our foundational pillars of the plan. It's really based on emissions reduction, energy security, and of course, affordability. We're all going to be talking to each of these points throughout the presentation. Next slide. Okay, Laura, turn this over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Lee. So we want to first acknowledge that we know emissions reduction doesn't start with our plan, and there's been a lot of work both within Hawaii Department of Transportation, but also outside of the department with sister agencies at the state and county levels, as well as private industry and members of the public who have because of their efforts, Hawaii is now a leader in EV adoption and in rooftop solar. And we've seen a lot of great things happen throughout our island, such as new bike paths and Hawaii Department of Transportation being a leader nationally in installing NEVI fast charging stations, and some exciting developments on the horizon for Hawaii, such as being able to produce renewable diesel expected later this year. Next slide. Despite all those efforts, we also recognize that transportation is still about half of the emissions that we produce in Hawaii. And so we want to keep bringing those numbers of emissions down. Next slide. The Nawahine and Hawaii Department of Transportation settlement agreement was signed at the end of 2020, or sorry, in the summer of 2024. 13 Hawaii youth, the governor and our department announced a historic settlement agreement, and it really formalizes our department's commitment to electrify and decarbonize transportation in order to meet existing state law, the state's climate targets. The settlement agreement also acknowledges that the department cannot do this on our own. We need everyone to help. The legislature, state and county agencies, private industry, and everyone in the public plays a role. Next slide. The Nawahine settlement requires the department to develop and implement a comprehensive statewide plan to reduce emissions from Hawaii's transportation sector on a timeline that complies with existing state law. So our Hawaii Revised Statutes 225P5 applies to all sectors and sets a target by 2030 to reduce emissions by 50% from 2005 levels, and also to reach net negative by 2045, meaning that by that time, we should capture more carbon than we emit. The plan also requires us to align with other existing state law, including managing our fleets to have cleaner vehicles and to eventually reach zero emission, take all actions necessary to eventually reach zero emissions in transportation. Next slide. And so this is our timeline for development of the energy security plan. We're near the end of our public comment period shown there in green. As Deputy Director Lee said, we'll publish the final energy security plan on October 15th. And this is a working plan, so we'll be revising it annually for the first 5 years, starting a new revision of the plan very soon after publishing the first draft. And pieces that we'll be adding in the next revision will be an economic analysis, an equity analysis, and also annual work plans. Next slide. The energy security plan charts progress to reduce emissions in all modes, and this graph here sums it up in terms of the strategies to be used. So the line at the top in orange shows the predicted status quo emissions. So if we keep doing the good work we talked about earlier, we're not going to see an increase in transportation emissions, but we're also not going to see our goals being reached in terms of the 2030 goal shown as the first yellow star and the 2045 net negative goal shown as the second yellow star. So we need to continue the good work already being done and add in more aggressive strategies to hit those state law targets. The largest wedge here is shown as clean fuel strategies combined. The next wedge down in blue is all of the impacts in emissions reduction from electrification strategies. The smaller wedge in pink is our fuel demand reduction strategies, things like multimodal transportation and cruise ship activity limits. And even with all of those aggressive strategies, we still have a gap between the emissions being produced and the state climate targets, state emissions reduction targets. And so that gap is planned to be filled with carbon removals and sequestration from techniques such as native reforestation or restoration of coastal wetlands. Next slide. And there are some priority actions across all modes that will help the many strategies move forward in our plan. The first is to implement the right legislative low carbon fuel framework for Hawaii. The second is to increase use of electric vehicles as well as equipment through infrastructure, incentives, and public education. The third is to invest immediately in techniques that sequester carbon. And then the fourth is to integrate decarbonization goals early in our project planning and as well as in our funding prioritization. And I'll hand over, or actually I'm going to actually be doing the ground transportation slides as well. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So our strategies for ground transportation, the top 3 strategies are to increase the use of electric vehicles, expand transportation choices, and use low carbon fuels for heavy duty trucks. Next slide. These are our electrification benchmarks and strategies. So we've set, in order to reach the very aggressive targets in state law, we've set benchmarks that align. So by 2030, in order to reach those existing state law targets, we would need to have 81% of new light-duty vehicle sales being electric. And by 2035, we would need to have all state and county light-duty vehicles transition to zero-emission vehicles. And by 2035, we would look to see all sales of new light-duty vehicles being EV. And the strategies that will help us reach those bold benchmarks would be building out our infrastructure for public EV charging, to enact financial incentives for EV purchase, to promote incentive programs that will accelerate the turnover of ICE vehicles, and the purchase of electric vehicles, to establish an electric vehicle battery recycling and disposal system, to work with our rental car fleets, ride share, to have them also be part of the transition to clean cars, and then possibly to enact preferential EV registration legislation. And we could look at things like supporting the sales tax exemption for electric vehicles, and then working with the county agencies to support electrification of the transit fleets, and with our sister agencies in transitioning all of the light duty fleets to electric. Next slide. A highlight example from this is the NEVI program, which provides fast public charging along the highway system. In early 2024, Hawaii Department of Transportation opened the first NEVI-funded electric vehicle charging station at Kahului Park and Ride. And then at the end of last year, we opened a second charging station. Our highways branch opened a second charging station at Aloha Tower. And HDOT Highways Mode continues with its plans to build out 9 more NEVI charging stations statewide, 2 on Kauai, 1 on Maui, a number on Hawaii Island, and another on Oahu in Mililani. Even with these charging stations coming online, there's still a big gap that needs to be filled, and with partnership from the private sector to install the needed additional public EV charging infrastructure throughout the islands. Next slide. Another group of strategies is around multimodal transportation. We do have predicted benchmarks of reducing vehicle miles traveled. Those are really as a result of implementing the strategies you see in the second box below. The top of our multimodal strategies is to plan and implement the 5-year priority multimodal network in partnership with the counties. After those 5 years, we'll continue increasing bicycle and pedestrian projects, trying to support the counties in transit expansion. And a large one is to support compact and transit-oriented development. And looking at some other strategies, such as employee commuter programs, or even following the lead of some other states in possibly finding a funding mechanism to support the counties providing free youth transit access. Next slide. An example here is that 5-year priority multimodal network, which you'll probably hear about more from us publicly in the near future, where we partnered our highways branch, highway planning, partnered with the county bike and pedestrian agencies to map out the gaps in that network. And we also partnered with the county transit agencies to map out the transit gaps. And using the county priorities, we are in the process of finalizing the critical gaps that need to be filled in the next 5 years to really provide a complete connected system that can be built. We can continue to build on from that point. And that 5-year priority multimodal network, we expect to be ready to share that out in the next coming months. Next slide. The last strategy for ground transportation is clean fuels. So by 2030, we want to increase clean freight vehicles using clean fuel by 2 to 4%. And by 2045, we want to see all of our freight vehicles using clean fuel or electrifying. And we're going to support those benchmarks by expanding infrastructure for clean fuel access by the public and by industry, and transition our heavy-duty vehicles to alternative fuels or electric, and have all state and county agencies transition their fleet vehicles to using clean fuels or electric if financially possible. Next slide. This is a list of the types of fuel that we expect to need in the coming years. The highlighted top 3 lines are the types of fuel we expect to use in the ground transportation sector. So you see biodiesel, renewable diesel, and ethanol. Next slide. And I'll turn over now to Deputy Director Dre Khalili.
Thank you, Laura. For the maritime sector, we took a look at segregating like 2 separate sets of strategies, one targeted at cruise ship activity and the other at our cargo operations in our commercial ports statewide. And we did this because I think it's an appropriate division of how we look at the different types of operations that occur in our facilities. And so our strategies target one for cruise ship reducing calls here in our ports. And then the other 3 strategies are oriented around different types of vessels that are involved in cargo operations. And we'll get into the details in the next few slides. Next slide, please. For cruise, the primary strategy is oriented around fuel demand reduction. And we took a look at the vessels that are currently calling to our ports here in Hawaii. And we observed that like the ships that are coming are generally older ships. And, they're not equipped with any, they aren't burning low emission fuels. And so based on the actual operations that we're seeing, we develop these strategies. And I want to clarify that the strategies that we're proposing, as far as the benchmarks for the reduced calls, are really, they will only be applicable to one, vessels that are not home ported here in Hawaii. And the other is vessels that are still emitting greenhouse gases. And so to achieve that reduction that you saw in the earlier slide, we are proposing at 5, 10, and 15-year intervals, like these various reductions. So within the next 5 years, by 2030, we're proposing to reduce cruise calls across the board by 50%, and then by another 50% in 2035. And then that 100% reduction by 2040. And that's how we aim to get to that significant reduction. I think for the cruise industry, we're looking for feedback through this comment period that identifies what other strategies might be available or possible. We are tracking what IMO and CLIA are proposing, but we're not seeing that these cruise lines are sending the ships that are, lower in emission or low emission or no emission vessels or technologies. So this is how we've arrived at the strategy. Next slide, please. And then for the remainder of the commercial port activity, we are looking at adoption of clean fuels across the various fleets that serve our islands. And so we're looking at the vessels that call between the West Coast or just overseas coming into Hawaii. We're looking at vessels that go between our islands. So those are primary tug and barge operations. And then port craft or harbor craft that just stay in the ports. And so based on what we know of these fleets and what we're seeing. For example, for some of the overseas cargo vessels that come from the West Coast and carry cargo here, we are starting to see a use of LNG vessels as well as dual fuel vessels. So the strategies and the benchmarks are based on some of the actual operations. And then for inter-island vessels, that's a tug carrying moving barges. We do have benchmarks for renewable diesel. And then for harbor craft, looking at some other fuels such as e-methanol and ammonia. So that is the strategy for maritime. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Otaguro for airports.
Thank you, Dre. Good afternoon, Kurt Otaguro. I'm the Deputy Director for Airports. Welcome, everyone. This afternoon, I'd like to cover our three strategies: use of sustainable aviation fuel, electrification of airfield, ground, and terminal access, and ramp efficiency optimization. So on the first slide, with regard to sustainable aviation fuel, if we can go to that, or as the industry calls it, SAF. SAF is a lower carbon alternative aviation fuel compared to the conventional jet fuels that are made from non-fossil fuel sources. The main challenge that we have in producing SAF is the cost, as well as the ample supply necessary to fuel all of the airlines. It's about 3 to 5 times or even higher to fuel with SAF today, much more expensive. What we need to do is work with the legislators and gain regulatory support to expand the use of SAF through things like tax incentives, tax credits, incentives for investments, things of that nature. What you see on the slide are two scenarios that gives projections over the next several years or decades. The column to the left is the Hawaii law, which forecasts net negative emissions 100% by 2045. The national SAF challenge is on the right. The same goals and targets. However, those targets will be achievable by 2050. The industry needs these tax credits for SAF, as I mentioned before, to offset those costs. So we're going to be working with local coalitions, the SAF coalitions, to build a diverse base so that we can determine SAF benchmarks, more legislation, and measure and achieve benchmarks. We hope to pass clean fuel standards and build more supply and distribution for clean fuels, and of course support the continued research and development for longer term fuel sources like eSAF or hydrogen. The next slide covers the electrification strategy on the airfield. And so what you see there is by 2035, we're targeting that, working with the rent-a-car agencies to encourage a 50% conversion to EV vehicles. By 2045, we plan to convert all of our ground support equipment, or as airports refer to it as GSE equipment, that you see by the planes at the airports, and convert those to EVs. We'll continue to support research and development for electric aircraft, and as well as electrify the ground service equipment at airports to power the planes when they're sitting at the gates. Of course, we continue to install and replace lighting with LED for aprons, runways, and taxiways. We also will convert our mobile equipment to EVs, and we are constantly assessing the EV charging infrastructure adequacy here at the airports. We have a good relationship with our rideshare and taxi partners, and we will continue to further that partnership as well with the car rental agencies. On the next slide, we refer to this as fuel demand reduction through ramp efficiencies. And so by 2045, the target is to reduce fuel flow by about 18% through the airport taxiways, or the ramps as we refer to them. We are working with the FAA to modernize Hawaii airspace. We will explore deployment of new technologies like performance-based navigation, PBNs, to help reduce congestion in the airspace above us. We want to optimize the aircraft movements on the taxiways and ramp to also prevent any kind of delays caused by congestion of the aircraft. We will do the on-site renewable power. And of course, we are always working with our tenants and concessions to adopt and comply with our emissions reduction policies. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation to Tammy Lee, who will present our administrative strategies.
Thank you so much, Kurt. So on the administrative policy side, we're working with the legislature and during this next upcoming session on some energy security bills. We'll also be developing a clean fuel standard or an alternative framework to reduce emissions, and I'll talk more about that later. Some of the policy and implementation strategies, we've already developed an impact tool to estimate the short and long-term emissions that are associated with our maintenance and construction projects. This tool is used to inform the prioritization of our projects in the planning stages. We're also keeping our youth council engaged through different times throughout the year on collaborations. Next slide. So this is an emission reduction strategy example of a clean fuel standard. Our energy security plan relies on transitioning to clean fuels, but faster local production or imports requires financial incentives for low carbon fuels and disincentives for high carbon fuels. We're going to be conducting a feasibility study to evaluate a Hawaii specific clean fuel standard or alternative framework to assess the potential financial impacts to our community. Next slide. We've already begun to invest in carbon capture initiatives. By capturing and storing the carbon emissions may also contribute to a reduction in fire risks, endangered species protection, cleaner air, and more. You see that QR code there at the bottom left. It takes you to our native planting page where we track our own native planting statewide. To date, we planted about 4,200 native plants. The website includes an interactive statewide map, as well as the type of native plants that we've already planted. Next slide. So just a little bit of background on our Transportation Youth Council. I think it was maybe November or December of last year. We asked for applications. There were about 80, close to 90 applications. 20 youth are chosen to be on members statewide. And we're just really, really excited. You know, these 20 young individuals are super intelligent, super bright. This is really our future. And they're taking time out of their lives to kind of come together as individuals with distinct perspectives to kind of share in this value. Next slide. And here's just a picture when we kicked off, had the kickoff meetings for the Youth Council. We went to the Daniel K. Inouye Airport and we planted some native plants. Next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're getting all of this community input. It's very important to us because it informs the final plan. Our final plan, as I mentioned, comes out October 15th. You see the QR code there on the right-hand side. It takes you to the draft of the plan as well as comment cards. So please take a moment and send us any kind of questions, comments. Really appreciate the time that you spent with us. And with that, I want to make sure that we save some time for questions, comments, and I turn it over to you, Laura, and everyone who has a comment or a question.
Thank you, Deputy Lee. Yeah, thank you so much again for being here. We wanted to save the majority of our time to just open the floor for feedback. So feel free to unmute and come on video if you're comfortable. And please ask any questions that you may have or offer any comments. You're also welcome to put your question or comment in the chat if you would
My name
prefer.
is Carla. I am with the Hawaii Island Chamber of Commerce, and I was invited to this presentation by the Cruise Line International Association just the other day. And I was just wondering if you guys could speak to any conversations with them. I know that they are decarbonizing a lot of their ships, or like their partners are. So they did share quite a bit about that. And like for us, especially in Hilo side, like cruise ships, just when they started coming in again after COVID, I know that that was definitely a source of relief for some of our small businesses. Have you guys been speaking with folks from CLIA?
So when we first were putting the drafts together, we did consult. We shared the preliminary strategies with our key stakeholders across the different modes. And so in our consultation for maritime, we did consult with the Hawaii Harbor Users Group, of which CLIA is a member, as well as Norwegian Cruise Lines, another member of the group. And so since April, we've been having discussions with them and sharing just the overall structure of this with the state goals that are set in law, and then the settlement requirements that we are working to meet, and then coming up with these strategies for transportation emission reductions efforts. And so so there have been discussions ongoing, but I think through the and our strategies, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, are oriented around what we're actually seeing. So while we do see, as I mentioned, that IMO and CLIA are making commitments and their own goals, they are extended beyond what the state law requires. So some of their goals are around, I think, 2050. And our state goal, or state law, requires a 2045 zero emission target. So through the comment period, I think what we're looking for is what the industry, what the cruise ship industry is going to be able to do to meet the strategy, or offer up a different strategy that still gets us to the same end goal. And so if the industry wants to make a commitment and invest in electrification, we could look into that. But based on what we're seeing, we're not seeing ships come to Hawaii that have capacity to plug into shore power. So we didn't incorporate that into our strategy here. So I think the bottom line answer to your question is, have we been discussing with them? Yes, we have. And are we open to other strategies that get us to the same place by 2045? Yes, we absolutely are. And we hope to collect that feedback through the comment period, which is through August 31st.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla, for your question, and Deputy Director Khalili for your response. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Feel free to share anything that you like in the plan, that you want to make sure is emphasized or remains in the plan. Feel free to also share if we're missing something in the plan, if there's a strategy or a point of view that we haven't got just right or haven't included, feel free to share that as well. Curtis, did you, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to share any comments?
Actually, I did. Sorry, my raise my hand function doesn't work, and my camera never seems to work.
No
Thank you
problem.
again for having the presentation. This is my third, and for Carla, I know this you stepped in after the CLIA meeting to see this presentation. It's surprising that there's only 12 that are on this final opportunity to vocalize what people are thinking. So I'm hoping that everybody is drafting their comments and has been submitting it diligently throughout these past few weeks, because next week's weekend is the end period to submit comments, I believe. That said, actually, I'm appreciative of being able to listen in each time. And I noticed what was initially my reaction to just the draft plan. I know it's changed because of what I'm learning through these presentations and what people have been saying on these presentations, as well as outside. Being in the industry, we do, my company and myself, we do have a lot of interaction with those that are in the cruise ship industry. And I know the emphasis was, or the reaction initially was, we can't have this plan. But now that I've been listening and we can see what is driving it, the lower emissions, that is important. And I think that's where a lot of people that may have been on these calls earlier have not followed through, haven't been able to hear how the plan is not just cut and dry. And as Dre had mentioned, it's, or actually at what I learned today too, it's a 5-year viewing of each year the draft plan is able to be reviewed. So my question now is, with all the comments that do come in, all the input that is coming from the public, the deadline was August 31. The final draft should be made in October, I believe. That is enough time to review, understand the public's intake, and implement that into a revised draft, or I'm not sure how that process works. I'm sure you don't revise the entire plan, but you take in consideration the possibilities, and then you create another draft that will have some of the recommendations or take into consideration some of the possibilities. So as Carla had been mentioning, talking to CLIA, and Dre had mentioned that the ships that need to be coming aren't here. If we have those discussions down the line, that it's possible the newer draft would state things like that. Or I'm not sure how it all works with all the input and how everything takes place. So it's sort of a question more than a statement.
Sure, I can maybe share a little bit more about our process, and then Deputy Director Khalili, if you want to add anything specific to comments on cruise, the cruise industry, please do. So yes, you're right, Curtis. We have one more week of public comment. The public comment period ends Sunday, August 31st. And then we have, basically the next month and a half to make sure that we've been able to assess all the comments received and integrate them as appropriate into the plan. And I think maybe just for public transparency, so you all know, we will be bucketing those comments. So we have received a lot of comments from the cruise industry to your question, asking, for more information on the timeline And if an alternative strategy, if HDOT is open to an alternative strategy that would still allow us to be in compliance with the state emissions reduction targets. And so we will have an answer, or we will have a kind of question that summarizes that sentiment and an answer to that sentiment online, and not just to the cruise industry, but in every mode, there's multiple comments coming in. And so we'll have bucketed comments and bucketed responses from the department so that the public and those stakeholders that are contributing comments will be able to see them. And then also from there, we'll be integrating into our plan where it's appropriate. Deputy Director Khalili?
Just want to add, as I've said a couple of times, I think we're looking for good feedback through the comment period on adjustments or alternative strategies. And, we're very sincere in our call for those alternative strategies. I will say that as we vet the comments that do come in, if they do include alternative strategies, I think we're going to be looking for data to support the alternative strategy, as well as, if that whatever the new strategy is requires a commitment from a cruise line or a series of cruise lines or CLIA members or whoever is offering the strategy, I think that commitment is going to be important. And I think we're going to be looking for interim steps like, hey, by this year, and they don't have to necessarily follow the benchmarks that we've set out, right? That 5, 10, and 15-year time horizon. But we are going to be looking for, hey, maybe it's in 7 years we're seeing something, but I think we're looking for strategies that are very specific and that really guarantee that we will reach the goal that's prescribed in state law. So I'll just offer that as, I'm hoping is a helpful guidance as to what we will be looking for. So backed by data, and if required, it does come with a commitment from the industry.
Thank you. That does help us understand. One question though, and this is just a layman outside of lawmaking and all that. So the law is set, and the law states 2045 for this goal, and the law can't be amended though for any reasons. Just a far reach.
Yeah, the current law, and I'll actually put it in chat after I finish talking, but the current Hawaii state law says that all sectors have to reduce emissions by 50% from 2005 levels by 2030, and that all sectors should reach net negative by 2045, meaning that Hawaii as a whole should be capturing or sequestering more carbon than we emit. And so our Navahine settlement agreement, it references back to the existing state law. And in that settlement agreement, Hawaii Department of Transportation is, for the most part, just stating that we will be doing everything in our power to comply with existing state law. And I can put the link in chat there.
All right. The only reason was I know the IMO, the cruise industry, their goal was 2050. So I know they're moving forward, but yes, they're 5 years behind what the state goal is. So just checking on that. Thank you.
Yes, to my understanding, I think Hawaii has the most aggressive climate targets in the nation. So I know there are other states with a 2050 net negative goal or neutral goal, and I believe Hawaii is the only one with the 2045 goal. And so that's what we're trying to be in compliance with as a state agency.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a comment or question? Okay, if no one else has a comment or question, we realize you could have been many other places on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and we just really thank you for your time today and your feedback and questions, and encourage you to give feedback on the online form. The link is in chat, or feel free to reach out to us at that link in chat on our energy security website. And we'll be happy to take your feedback in a call or in an email as provided in that link as well. Any last comments, Tammy, to close us out?
Yeah, just thank everyone for spending your afternoon with us. Use the QR code, send in your comments. As we mentioned, August 31st is the last, but it's not the end all be all. We're going to be, having different iterations of the plan as well. So thank you so much, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Mahalo.
Thank you.